free, then wander through the world with me, and gather full of sea will be our rendezvous. To further on we'll gather through the years, collecting special memories, collecting souvenirs, and through the years we'd like to live. And every day the sun will shine, and winter will be drinking summer wine, and every day that you are mine will be a lovely day. As long as love still wears a smile, I'll know that we'll be two for the road, and that's a long, long while. Collecting souvenirs and living life the way we please. In summertime the sun will shine, in winter we'll drink summer wine, and every day that you are mine will be a lovely day. As long as love still wears a smile, I know that we'll be two for the road, and that's a long, long while. And that's a long, long while.
All right. My friend Tim, who I know was all of your friend Tim too. Tim was my friend for 47 years. We had so many adventures together. He was the kind of friend that I could say anything to, and he could say anything to me, and we did it all the time. So most of our personal stories are completely inappropriate. And I'd be happy to share them at a later date. So I'm going to ask you to talk about young Tim. I think everybody here knows Tim from his time in Los Angeles, but not very many people know Tim as he was growing up. So I spoke to his sister Sharon, and she gave me some good stories. The first thing I think comes to mind is Tim, why the two M's? And Tim was named after his father's best friend, whose last name is Tim, T-I-M-M, and that's where that comes from. The other thing that I always thought about Tim was Tim knew something about everything. He could tell the greatest stories, and if you fact checked him, he was always true. He had an encyclopedic knowledge, and I think he remembered everything from when he was young, and he could talk to anybody and tell stories. There was countless times when we would carpool to a job, And when we were walking up to the car, somebody in the audience would come up and say something to him, and a half hour later I'd be standing there while Tim was telling him stories. So, Tim was born in Ames, Iowa in 1947. He was the oldest of 6 kids. He had 4 brothers and a sister. By the time he was 5 years old, he had lived in Ames, St. Paul, New Haven, and San Francisco. When he lived in New Haven, Connecticut, the house was a few blocks away from the fire station, and on the weekend they would have rehearsals with the community band and the drum and fife corps. And Tim used to go down there and listen to the drum and fife corps, and he said he just thought the drummers were fantastic. He couldn't believe that. And that's what got him hooked on the drums, and ever since then, he wanted to play the drums. After San Francisco, the family moved back to Des Moines, and while in Des Moines, his sister said that his greatest achievement was blowing up one of the houses in the neighborhood. Tim and his brother Paul used to play in some of the vacant houses, and one day they were playing in a house, and they wandered down into the basement, and Tim saw this pipe sticking out of the wall with a cap on it. So he unscrewed the cap, and he heard this whooshing sound. And he turned to Paul and said, "I'm not sure what this is, but maybe we should leave." So they did, and later that night when the family was watching the news at dinner time, they were surprised to see this house burning down after it had been leveled by a gas explosion. So Tim never admitted to this until way later in his life. He never told his parents, and apparently he only told his sister and brothers what had happened. After Des Moines, Tim moved to Davenport, and their house was a couple blocks away from the Mississippi River, and that's when he started taking drum lessons. By the time he was 13, he was a pretty good drummer, and he would set up the drum set next to his window in the upstairs bedroom, and he would wait for girls to walk down the sidewalk. And as they walked down the sidewalk, Tim would play boom, 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 to the speed that they walked down the sidewalk. If they would speed up, Tim would speed up. If they would slow down, Tim would slow down. And his sister said he was very adept at always kneeling down. He also started his first band when he was 14 in Davenport with some friends, and the band was called the Infernos. When he turned 15, the family moved to Dallas, and that's when he started taking percussion lessons with Mitch Peters, who was the percussionist in the Dallas Symphony. By the time he was 18, he was playing extra at the Dallas Symphony, the Dallas Opera, and he was always playing drum set. He got a steady job in high school at the Adolphus Hotel in downtown Dallas. And his sister said this is where he got an excellent education in the world of prostitutes, drunks, gangsters, and politicians. He got his AA degree at a junior college in Dallas, and then in 1969, when he was 21, he loaded up his VW Bug and drove out to enroll in classes at USC. His USC experience wasn't the best. He dropped out at his second semester. He told me he felt like he never really fit in. I think there were some other things that went on, but I'm not sure what that is. Also, shortly after he showed up in Los Angeles, his girlfriend, the 18-year-old flute player from the high school band, showed up on his doorstep. Her parents were really distraught that she would run away and he was 10. So Tim and Darby got married to try to smooth things out. After they got married, Darby turned to Tim and said, "I think we should settle down and start a family." And that was the last thing Tim wanted at that point in his life. He said, "Well, maybe we should just get a cat." So Darby stayed around for maybe about a year, and then she realized that the LA lifestyle wasn't quite for her, and she moved back to Texas and they got divorced. And that was the only time Tim was married. I don't know about that. We lived on and off. The other thing that happened when Tim was here, he learned about an opening in the LA Philharmonic for a percussion spot, and he called his teacher in Dallas, Mitch Peters, and said, "There's an opening, and I think you should come out and take the audition." And Mitch said, "I hadn't heard about that, but that sounds like a good idea." So Mitch flew out, and he won the audition, and he became one of the percussionists in the LA Philharmonic. Shortly after that, Tim started playing extra with the Philharmonic, and that's when his career started taking off. He also played drum set this entire time, as he did throughout his life. Some of the bands he was playing with were the Mystic Knights of the Oingo Boingo, a blues band, which later became Oingo Boingo. He was playing in a salsa band called Rudy and Los Papas. And then for a while, he went up to Reno and played drum set with some of the bands up there in the hotels and the casinos. When he came back from Reno, that's about the time I met Tim, and we became great friends right off the bat. We played countless jobs together. I think we played opera, ballet, recording sessions. We worked with some of the greatest conductors that came to LA during the time we were working together, and we also played with some of the worst. If there was a job, and Tim and I were both on it, we did it just because we had the best time hanging out with each other. And it was either going to be a wonderful musical experience, or it was going to be horrible and something that we could laugh about afterwards and just talk about. Tim and I also shared an interest in collecting vintage instruments, and every time one of us found one, we'd call together and say, I found this, do you think I should buy it? And the other one would say, well, of course, just buy it, it's a no-brainer, we'll fix it later. So over the years, we both amassed a very large collection of instruments, and as I'm dealing with Tim's instruments now, I realize he amassed the largest collection. He owned stuff that I never even knew he owned, that he never told me about, and it's pretty amazing, all the things that he ended up buying. In August of last year, Tim went into the hospital to have an operation to repair some vertebrae in his neck that had disintegrated, and that was residual effects from cancer treatment. Somebody need a bottle of water here. In there crying now. I'm not used to public speaking. So he went in to have this operation to repair the vertebrae in his neck because they were starting to collapse and press on some nerves, and that was causing him to lose use of his hands. The operation was a success, but for some reason Tim just had a really hard time bouncing back from the operation, and he kept getting weaker. At a certain point, the doctors were concerned that he might aspirate something because his swallowing was also compromised by the cancer. So they gave him a tracheotomy and a feeding tube. From that point, Tim just kept getting weaker, and he was pretty much an invalid and really couldn't get out of bed. I would try to visit him several times a week just to cheer him up and talk to him. And we always assumed that he was going to get better if he would do his physical therapy because the doctor said he should. So the morning that Tim passed away, I was visiting him with Jackie and some other people, and it seemed like just a normal morning for Tim. We were talking and laughing and having a good time, and everything seemed okay. And we were going over some business things that we thought we should take care of. And then Tim asked me that if something did happen, would I do some things for him? And I said, yes, I'd be happy to do that. And then he reached up and we held hands, and he said, thank you, Scott. And then later that night, Jackie called me and said, Tim had come in cardiac arrest, and we rushed over to the hospital to be with him. And we were each holding his hands, and as he slipped away, I said, thank you, Tim, for being my friend. And I think that's the best way our friendship could have ended, that the last thing we said to each other was thank you. And I can't tell you how much I missed him. He was the best friend. We had so much fun together. And the last thing, just a twist of fate that even kind of binds us together even more, is that Tim died in the hospital I was born in. And all the things, places that he could have been. So anyways, I know there's some other people that want to speak. They probably have more silly stories than me. I just wanted to share what a great friend he was. I I know everybody misses him. I miss him a lot. So, Marilyn Harris, who knew him a long time ago, has offered to say some things, and so some of them.
But I can speak, and I'm happy to speak. I flew here from Austin, Texas, to remember Tim and he's here tonight. Those of you that I played in the Army Symphony from about 1992 to 2005, and then I moved back to Austin. When I was going through a difficult divorce, Tim became really my best friend, Tim and Jackie. They took me under their wing when I got an apartment in South Pasadena. Although Tamsin saved my life too. She allowed me to move in when I had to separate from my husband. Then I got an apartment in South Pasadena. And Tim and Jackie became the very best friends in my whole life at that time. And I was hanging out with them. And Tim and I were both from Texas, although Ohio, but he was from Richardson, Dallas area. We figured out that I had been at the elementary school that he voted in his first presidential election in on the day, because I was in Richardson, Texas also. And my mom was in the Richardson Symphony, and we're trying to figure out if she's still here, but I don't see her. But anyway, the story I wanted to tell was just that right after Crouching Dragon, Hidden Tiger, or the name of that movie is Escape, something like that. That movie had just come out, Yo-Yo Ma was on the soundtrack, and I got hired for a gig, and the bride wanted Crouching Dragon, Hidden Tiger music. They wanted the whole wedding to be Crouching Dragon, Hidden Tiger. And they only hired one cellist, because they heard the cello, Yo-Yo Ma, and they hired me. So I went and bought the CD, and I'm like listening to it. I haven't even seen the movie, and I'm writing it all down, trying to transcribe whatever I can even think of as an unaccompanied cello bit. What can I do? There's some stuff that moves. There's a lot of atmospheric things. And I was talking to Jackie and Tim about it, and Tim goes, "Oh, you know what?" Because I said, "How am I going to pull this off? A wedding with just a cello?" And Tim says, "You know what? I can rig a percussion set that you can play with your foot. And it's going to have strings of chimes and bells and little Asian bamboo things, and it's going to be pitched." So he yells this thing, and I'm like playing this stuff, and I'm like going, atmospheric stuff. And it was actually really beautiful and really effective in me, the whole thing, instead of an unaccompanied cello. Sometimes I was just improvising. So anyway, that's the story I wanted to share.
Next, Paul Sternhagen, who also shares some stories.
I always enjoyed working with Tim when I had the opportunity. He's such a nice guy, and just pretty laid back and easy person to work with. He was also really generous. We were doing a gig one time, and he noticed that on my big concert bass drum, it was missing one of the T-handles, the rod that was used to tighten down the head. And he goes, "I think I may have one of those in my garage that might fit this drum." And so the next time I saw him, he walks up and hands me one of these things, and he goes, "Try this on your bass drum. I think it might fit." And it's like, he would just, he collected stuff and had all these things. And he's just, willing to share this kind of thing. So fast forward about another 20 years or so into this past December, Scott was helping Tim to try to thin out some of the extra instruments and stuff that were filling his garage and his storage unit and his home. And so was trying to put out an email that had several marimbas for sale and a vibraphone. And I figured, I think I've got enough marimbas, but I don't personally play vibraphone all that often. Most of the time, the gigs that I do, if there's a vibraphone part, someone else is usually playing that. I'm usually doing other stuff. So I don't really play vibe that often, but if I, and I could go easily, it's not unusual for me to go like 5 years or more without playing vibraphone on a gig. So, but I thought, I told Scott I'd be interested in maybe the vibraphone. And so the word came back that Tim said, well, if you buy the 4-octave skinny bar marimba, I'll give you the vibraphone. and I thought, this is nuts. Why would he do that? And Scott said, Tim said that you were really nice to him. And I thought, who on this planet would not be nice to Tim? I mean, he was such a sweet guy that it's like, I don't think I did anything special, but took him up on the offer, and so I now have those 2 instruments. And for someone who rarely has a gig playing vibraphone, the really weird thing is, just in the last 2 weeks, I've had 2 jobs ready to play vibraphone. And I took that instrument. Thank you, Tim.
Teresa.
Hi, my name is Teresa Diamond, and you should all settle in. I have a few stories. I had to think about it. When did I meet Tim? Where was the first place we got to know each other? And I narrowed it down to, I think, 1984 and the Glendale Symphony. It was a weird year. It was the year after Carmen Dragon had died, and they decided Dan Lewis would be a great replacement. I knew there would be some exhales for him at the Glendale Symphony. That lasted a year, and because I was at USC, I got the chance to play at the Dorothy Chandler with Dan and Tim and many others. And I thought to myself, as I was thinking about Tim and all the time we spent together, wasn't it prescient that I met him at the Dorothy Chandler and spent about 25 years there at the twilight of his career, sitting in the pit together playing opera. So we came full circle. To say that Tim had a remarkable career is to really understate it. It was a really storied career, and you'd never know it talking to Tim, because he was the most humble human being in the history of the world. He would not tell you about any of the fun things he did, but I want to highlight a few of them. The first one I want to talk about is his 1976 appearance with Boingo Boingo on The Gong Show. These were my formative years, where growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, mostly what I did was watch TV, because that was really the only thing you could do in Phoenix, Arizona in 1976. And I have to tell you, if you've never seen it, I have to outline it for you. The curtain opens, and there stands 3 musicians. A woman who looks like a Ziegfeld Follies girl playing an accordion, gotta love that. A pianist who's dressed in a tuxedo and looks a lot like Groucho Marx. And Tim, 29-year-old Tim, weighing about 110 pounds in a tuxedo with a very large triangle. And the man announces, "Ladies and gentlemen, we will now play the very rarely performed Haydn Trio for piano,
accordion, and triangle. After the introduction, Tim jumps behind the drum set and all chaos breaks loose. He shares the stage with a cymbal playing alligator, Richard Elfman in a plane that spews real smoke, who's playing, I think, kazoo. Danny Elfman's playing trombone. There is this ragtag, odd marching band where everybody's wearing MC Hammer pants and a helmet that has one hand on the top of it, jumping around the stage. And they make it all the way through their piece without being gonged, and Tim's in the back playing the most remarkable circus drums you ever heard. It's continuous, it's fast, it's frenetic, constant, and perfectly weird for the moment. After the remarkable performance, they have to ask the judges what they think of it. And the first judge says, quote, this is really interesting, "I don't think we should let this group loose again until they develop a vaccine for weirdness." That was Sherry Lewis of Puppet fame. She gives them 8 points for being very funny. Buddy Hackett, in a very much simpler time, gives them a 6 and suggests the female accordion player should come to his son's birthday party. It was a simpler time in 1976. Bill Bixby, remember that guy, archbishop of Eddie's father, was the final judge, and he said, and I quote, "The drummer really deserves all the credit for never smiling during the whole performance." After receiving 24 out of 30 points, Oingo Boingo is declared the winner, and you see them receive their trophy, and there stands Tim in the back, holding the tail of the cymbal-playing alligator. It's a remarkable thing. Go home and YouTube it. You've got to see it. It will be 5 minutes of your life you will enjoy. Moving on to another simpler time, my dear friend Judy Chilnick and I put together a little group that played school concerts. And we called ourselves Color Sound. And we very indelicately, we had sort of a roving chair. Tim started out in the chair and played for a long time, but then he got pretty busy and couldn't do it anymore. And we called the group Judy, Teresa, and Boy. It was a simpler time. Tim, this was the 80s and the 90s, and we were sent, I dare say we played hundreds of these concerts, and we were sent to some less than wealthy neighborhoods in the LA, and a lot of them in the 80s and 90s had been dubbed what they called police protection zones, which meant that when you drove in, a lot of times you would have to go sort of like through a police barricade to get to the school. And so here comes Tim in a rusty old white van with darkened windows and a brick that he used to put under the left tire when he parked to make sure that it didn't go anywhere. And he's slowly driving down the street looking for addresses, looking at the playground, trying to find the auditorium. He met a lot of policemen. They would stop him and say, "Hey dude, what are you doing driving slowly through this neighborhood around the school?" And he'd point to the drum set in the back, and pretty soon he'd come in a little late and he'd say, "You know, I just met Carl the policeman. You know, he plays bass on weekends. He wants me to come sit in." So Tim was often late, but he often met new friends, and I can see why. It was the band. Tim was a fixture in many orchestras, particularly the Long Beach Symphony and the Santa Barbara Symphony. And I want to talk about one year in the Santa Barbara Symphony's history that I got to share with Tim. And I know Scott's going to relish this moment. There was a young lady named Giselle Bendor that was a conductor for quite a long time. And her last year of her contract was in 2005, 2006. And some marketing genius decided that they were going to dub that year the Giselebration. And so they allowed her to program all sorts of very, very percussion-heavy works, which we were very happy to have the work. I have to tell you a little bit about Giselle to make this story interesting and lead you down the right path. She had a unique pedigree. Her parents were Polish-born Jews. She was born in Uruguay, and she decided to go to Israel to study music. So she was multilingual, but entirely unintelligible in every language she spoke. You could not tell what she was saying ever. The accent was really not, I don't know. So I think she had something. I think she had like a little thing for Tim. Because she quite frequently, when he played down there, would find stupid reasons to stop the orchestra and talk to Tim. You know? So there was this one Pops concert we were playing, and Tim was playing drum set like nothing I've ever heard. That guy could swing, that guy could play. And he was doing what all great orchestral drum set players do, and ignoring Giselle. He was sitting down the time and playing, and we were sounding great. Well, she looked up and didn't see his eyes, and she thought, okay. And she said, Tim, I need you to look at me. You're not following me. Well, she started again, and he followed her into the ditch. It was fast, it was slow. He hung on every movement. Even Giselle, after 16 bars, stopped and started laughing. And she said, never mind. The other one I have to tell you about is a little Randy, but we're all friends here, and you couldn't know Tim without knowing that he had a little bit of a bawdy sense of humor. So during that time we played El Las Noches de las Mayas by Revueltas, which requires 13 percussionists. Great hang for the percussion section. And Tim had this remarkable whirro. It looked like a scorpion or a lobster. It went, this huge board, and then it had this tail that turned back on itself. It was a magnificent instrument. I don't know where he got it, but he was so proud of that instrument. He loved that thing. And that guy could groove. I mean, Tim had such a knack for pocket and groove. And so we're playing En Las Noches de las Mayas, and again, Giselle thinks, well, I gotta flirt with Tim. And she stops, and she looks at Tim, and she says, Tim, what are you playing? And he's so proud of this instrument. He holds it up like it's some sort of, devotion to God. Happy to show off this lovely instrument. And she says, oh, Tim, it's way too big. Tim turns to me and says, I've been waiting all my life to have a woman say that in public. I apologize. I will say, and some people have hinted at this, Tim was really a musical egalitarian. My husband said, what the hell is that? He would come to work and he'd say, hey, I'm playing with the Philharmonic this week, And then the next week he'd come in and he'd say, hey, I'm playing drum set at Hollywood High. And then he'd come in the next week and he'd say, oh, I gotta learn this piece that Les is conducting for the Green Umbrella series. And it was just him. It didn't matter what he was asked to play. He was so happy to be playing, and he treated every single job, whether it was just a community choir or Hollywood High or the LA Phil and the Green Umbrella series, with the same amount of devotion and love. He just was a remarkable guy in that way. And you would never know it. I have a list of all the places he played here: the LA Phil, the LA Chamber, Glendale Symphony, LA Master Chorale, Pasadena Symphony, Pacific Symphony. Every touring group who came through town, Bolshoi Chorale Petit, toured with musicals, toured with symphony orchestras, film dates, record dates, casuals, just everything and anything, and he never would mention any of it to you, but just to say, hey, I'm having this great time playing this gig. And that was really Tim. Of course, I have to mention LA Opera. In 2003, he was appointed second chair in the LA Opera by Kent Nagano, our first music director. And it is here, in hours of playing and hours of not playing, that Tim and I really got to know each other. I want to tell you all the things that Tim taught me, mostly not musical. First one is musical. It's really important to tune the bass drum. Now, some of you who are not percussionists might not even know you have to tune a bass drum. But Tim took his bass drum tuning seriously. If he got there before me, as I was coming down the hall, I could hear him working on the bass drum, and that was the first thing he did every time he got to the hall. He was very excited about having that instrument sound good. Now, the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion is not a great environment for a bass drum. We end up tuning it a lot, but it was one of the things I loved about Tim. The other thing Tim taught me is how to have a conversation and count yes at the same time. Very, very important, especially when you play opera. Tim also taught me history is important. As Scott alluded to, he had a mind for all the historical things. If you carpooled with him, he'd point at a building and he'd say, "Did you know that was a haberdashery in 1906? I did not, Tim, thank you. I did feel a little bit like he was pulling my leg when he stood on the balcony of my home and pointed at sort of a wild artichoke plant in the back of my backyard and said, "You know, there were many artichoke farms in Mount Washington." I don't know that I can ever verify that, but I'm thinking he was pulling my leg. The other thing Tim taught me was the hang is important. He loved the hang, and you knew if he wasn't working, you could find him at Pro Drum or MT, doing the hang, hanging with the people he loved and talking to the people he loved. I also learned that it's okay to embrace off-color humor. And I must tell you one story, I'll try to keep it very clean. But we would talk about movies, we would talk about TV, and one day Tim came in and he said to me, "I have a movie to recommend to you, Teresa. It's called The Aristocrats. Not that one with kittens and puppies, but it's a great movie. You have to take Jim and you have to go see it." So Jim and I dutifully went to go see this movie. I must tell you a little bit about it. I'm going to keep it clean, I promise. The movie is about a family of entertainers who walks into an agent's office and they're looking for representation. And the agent says, "Well, what does your act do?" Well, comedians love this joke because it's an improvisation. It's all about how gaudy, how absurd, how colorful you can make this act be. And it can get quite disturbingly vivid, let's say. And so what happens, the comedians love this joke, and they in this movie, it's a documentary, they show all these people telling this joke. At the end, the punchline is, the agent looks at the guy when he gets done describing the group, and he says, "Well, what do you call yourself?" And he goes, "The Aristocrats." Well, why did Tim want me to go see it? Because he wanted to put it in his act. Every time an orchestra falls apart, he would turn to me and he'd go, "The Aristocrats." And he knew it wouldn't be funny unless I saw the movie. Tim also taught me you can survive being born to a Sicilian mother. I have so far, but I don't know. He loved Lionel Trains, and he thought it was okay for me to like Lionel Trains too. We both shared that. Our families would set up Lionel Trains at Christmas time. He also taught me the best treat in the vending machines in the green room was the coconut pineapple popsicle, and you should have one at every intermission. He taught me that Long Beach was Iowa by the sea, and if you're there in June, you can go to the Iowa by the Sea picnic. He also taught me that you can find delicious food that is really dirt cheap. And he knew every place in Los Angeles to find a good taco truck or good cheap eats. It didn't matter where you were. He also taught me, last but not least, there's nothing you cannot find at Goodwill. Tim was the most gifted, natural-born musician I have ever met. If you want to compliment a percussionist, or specifically a great snare drummer, you say, that guy has good hands. Tim had the most remarkable hands. They were relaxed, they were fluid. For a traditional grip player, which is much more difficult to do than to make flute look fluid and make look easy, he had great control, great touch, great speed, great endurance. He was a remarkable player. Beyond that, I loved his gift of groove. That guy could place a note in the pocket better than anybody I ever knew. I was always amazed to sit next to him when he played some rhythm stuff, and just how fantastic it was. When he played drum set, it always had character, it had personality, it made you laugh. It was cheeky, it was fun. The things he chose to play were always inventive and fun. I just loved it. In the last year, we've lost many too many musical colleagues, and it hurts my heart. And I miss all of them. I've gone to too many memorials. But the one thing that I have taken great strength from is how the musical community rallies around these people's families and their colleagues when we're sad and when we're in need and when we're missing these people. Even though we work in a very competitive business, this is one wonderful family that you and I and everyone in this room belongs to. You know, I know someday there's going to be a memorial for me, and I know when I get to heaven, Tim will have the bass drum tuned, and I'll say, "Where are we going to meet, Teresa?" Thank you.
There's a lot of small people here. Now, good. Tim Boatman was a truly wonderful and remarkable man. And you all know that, of course, that's why you're here. And I just want to add a couple of comments to augment his legendary status. And some of them we referred to already. One of Tim's characteristics that always struck me as being extraordinary was his encyclopedic knowledge of a lot of esoteric and eclectic information. Scott referred to that, Lisa referred to it. I mean, it was unbelievable. So the result was that, you know, you could start a conversation, but you had no idea where it was going to go. Because as soon as you mentioned something, particularly if it was a location or a neighborhood in Los Angeles, he knew all this history. And I just, how does he know all this stuff? I mean, I could understand he knew a lot about snare drums, he knew a lot about cymbals, and he knew a lot about, you know, wood blocks or what have you. But how does he know that a certain street had this history, or a certain building like Teresa mentioned had that kind of history? It was extraordinary. And it made conversations with him really interesting and actually a little long. Another thing I want to also refer to is Tim's commitment to music, percussion, and to excellence in everything that he did. His integrity in pursuing the musical perfection, it was just so important to him. And you know, as you look for sounds that would exemplify the history and the style and the type of music that we were playing, was really extraordinary. At Los Angeles Opera, I played a timpani, and Tim would often play bass drum, which would be right next to me. And this is going to what Paul mentioned a little bit, and what Teresa mentioned about, is that he was really into tuning the timpani. And as Paul said, you know, with the tuning bar, I would oftentimes get there early, and Tim would also, and Tim would be there with the bass drum, and he'd be going each individual lug and tapping it, hitting it loud, and then tapping it. Well, this would go on for a while. And his interest in trying to get the bass drum just perfect, even if he had only 5 or 6 months to play during the course of the opera, was extraordinary. And of course, for those of us who were musicians, we were glad when we finished tuning the bass drum. I'm not sure when it was that I met Tim, whether it was a community orchestra or a church show or what have you. But we really got to know each other playing the Joffrey Ballet. It was a great job for me. I was very young. Tim was very young. It was an exciting situation. We played Stravinsky, the Right Spring, Petrushka, and really great players. And it was really fantastic. The percussion section was Tim, Tom Rainey, myself, and Scott Shepard, and later Bill Gustedo. So we had a real diverse cast of characters, which led to some really funny times. I'd like to share one of them with you. We were playing a piece that was called Clowns. It's kind of aptly titled because it had a long extended percussion solo in the middle of it. And not just just like one individual, just the whole percussion section. And when I say solo, I mean it was solo. I mean the rest of the orchestra stopped, and the percussion section played. Terry Cravens was there. I'm going to refer to him in just a minute, and you're sitting in just the perfect spot. So one night we're playing along, and the dancers are on stage dancing, we're down at the pit and everything. And as we start to get kind of close to the solo, the music stand lights in our area go out. So, you know, we just couldn't see the music at all. And Tim was very quick, and he figured that one of the musicians in front of us, namely Phil Boatman, who was kind of a rascally horn player and the contractor, had probably kicked out the music stand extension cord because they were in these plugged into these holes in the floor. And the one that ours was right near Till's foot. So in between us and Till was Mr. Terry Cravens playing bass trombone. So I hear Tim say to Terry, Terry, tell Till, plug the lights back in. Nothing happens. Hours go by, still dark, and get a little closer, and this time with a little greater sense of urgency. Terry, come on, get the lights back in, come on. Well, nothing really happens. You see Terry moving around a little bit, but the lights are still dark, and it's getting really close down. And this music is complicated enough that you couldn't just like play whatever or anything. It was like you had to read the music, and it just seemed suddenly really incredibly dark. So, and it was the last resort. Terry, turn on the blinking light lights! People start moving, all of a sudden, the lights come on, we played our part, we all lived to tell the tale. Seriously though, Tim was a really extraordinary person. He was kind, he was generous, he was patient, he was understanding, he was a really extraordinary musician, and Thomas and you. Thank you.
That was Willie Colbert, and it changed the order on the weddings. I hope that's okay.
Very honored to be able to speak about my buddy Tim. And it's so wonderful to see everyone here. You know, I met Tim when I first moved here. I was in school and didn't have any money. And Tim knew that. So he offered me a job. And he said, wait, I have this really cool percussion group. Do you want to play with it? I said, yeah, that sounds great. I'm down for anything because, you know, I don't have any work. And he's like, okay, meet me at my house next Wednesday, 7 a.m. So I show up in my little Tercel and I knock on the door and comes out with a huge cup of coffee, thermos. He's like, get in the van. And I look over and there's this big, ugly, orange van across the street and okay, so we hop in the van, and this thing is like full of like 1,000 percussion instruments. And he starts driving through LA through rush hour. He drove like an hour and a half through town, and he didn't need a Thomas guide. Raise your hand if you know what that is. When I moved to LA, all I did was drive with this 12-pound map. He didn't need, there wasn't any Thomas guide. He had LA memorized. So we drive through town, we get to some random elementary school. He's like, okay, we gotta unload. And we start pushing all this equipment across the basketball field, all the way across to the classroom. And actually, I think it was the gymnasium. It was like full of like 1,000 kids. And he's backstage getting ready, and he pulls out a big brush, and he had a lot of hair. He's brushing his hair, and he's like, he's a beautiful guy, let's bring him out. So then he goes out and he starts talking to the kids, and he's like, really got their attention. Like, so many children, and they're like, all like, really focused on what he's talking about. Because he had a really good way of talking to the children in a way that really got them interested. And he talked about the tympanic membrane, how that's the eardrum, and it shares the same name with timpani, which would play. And that sound from the timpani makes your eardrum move, and that's how the brain hears. And I'm like, this guy's really smart. Not like 24, I don't know. So he's like talking to them, and he's got like this encyclopedic knowledge. Like before Google, there was Tim Boatman. If you needed to know something, you just asked Tim. And like, so then he's at one point there was questions, and he said, anybody have questions? So lots of kids ask questions. So there's one little girl who was 6 years old, first grade, asked a question. And when she asked the question, there were like some people were gasping, and people were looking at each other like confused. And we're like, that's weird, why is that happening? But Tim ignored that and just had a conversation with her. And afterwards, a few teachers came up to Tim to tell him that she had never spoken before. And that everyone thought she was mute. And I think that says something about Tim and his ability to connect people. So then after the job, I think Scott and Tim, we all were going to load the van. So Scott and Tim move a bunch of gear to the van. And I have to go back and get the Glock, which they warned me about. Because it was like 800-pound Glock. And somebody had built it on a stand that was like really bad. And like a homemade one, right? So I'm sweating, I'm trying to get all this stuff out of the gymnasium or whatever, I'm pushing it. And sure enough, the Glock goes right over, opens up, and like 49 Glock metal bars go into concrete. And like the crash lasted like 5 minutes. And after it stopped, I heard like from a mile away, Scott and Tim laughing their heads off. So yeah, I worked with Tim a bunch around that time. We would work in orchestras together. We actually had a TV show that we worked on in the early 90s called Briscoe County Jr. Don't worry if you haven't seen it, no one saw it. But it had one season, but it was so fun to work with him. And he was always such an empathetic, beautiful guy. He really was a beautiful guy. And I'll really miss Tim, and my condolences to his family and to Jackie.
I just want to add something to the school shows. I also played countless school shows with Tim, and we would get in that van at 5:30 in the morning and then remember, oh, that's right, Tim doesn't have any heat. So it was always a great ride to the school. Wally Snow played tons of those concerts with us, and there was the crash seat, which was a bass drum on its side in between the two front seats, and Wally and I would take turns sitting in the crash seat, because if Tim had to slam on the brakes, whoever was in the crash seat would go through the windshield and be killed. So my job was to watch Tim driving home if I was in the passenger seat to make sure he didn't fall asleep and activate the crash seat. Next up is Linda Sue.
Hello. Hello. What a privilege to be here. Where's Timothy? Where are you? Timothy. So, I asked my two colleagues who now independently have moved to Aiken, South Carolina. One is Kent Hannibal and one is Bill Carpenter, if they had anything to share. And Kent started off with, he was so easy to work with, knowledgeable about everything, including percussion. A wonderful percussionist, but the best orchestral bass drum and cymbal person I ever worked beside. And Bill Carpenter remembered when he first started to play with the Long Beach Symphony, and it was probably in the late 1970s, when they opened the Terrace Theater, and Van Cliburn played that concert. And he remembered that Van Cliburn signed the harp part of the piano. And that was probably the first time Tim performed with the Long Beach Symphony. And Bill went on to say, from South Carolina, Tim was a rock. He was always present, there to help, there to perform, there to blend, there for us all. His knowledge of repertoire and instruments was like none other, making him the resource to the best performance possible. But his sound. No one could coax and shape the sound of an instrument like Tim. His technique, taste, choice of mallets and sticks were exquisite and resulted in the best quality an instrument could produce. I believe Tim and I first met in the Young Musicians Foundation debut orchestra some 50 years ago. I think there are some people here part of that. Our paths crossed frequently, but it was Long Beach for me. His talent became most visible. Kind, helpful, sensitive, he was an asset to the orchestra and players such as myself. A period in LA's music scene is passing, a scene that Tim was an integral part of. Sure, another scene will develop. It always does. But with his passing, the time that Tim was part of, and those whom he nurtured and performed with, is giving way to something else. And this is especially for Timothy, Tim with the double M, and Uffy on the other side of the double M. You are Tim's legacy, Timothy. Tim was totally generous. He never asked for anything, but was willing to loan out when there was a need. Countless times he had that one strange and exotic instrument that was needed in some new orchestral piece. And the children. He performed many concerts for school children. He was always patient and loving. I remember his latest friend, Jordan, who had a son, Tyler, and he became like a surrogate uncle to this young man, so he could see things that he would never otherwise get to see. And about networking, he wasn't a braggart. He never talked about himself, nor did he talk about the jobs he had just finished or the next best job he was going to. He simply knew himself and how to handle anything required. He showed up always on time and often lifting and lugging heavy instruments if there was a need. He loved pets and loved taking walks in the park and speaking to everyone at length about themselves and their pets. I've always thought that Tim had a photographic memory. He knew all the best routes to get from place to place. If you saw some odd thing along the road or some dilapidated building and asked about it, he would know. There was literally nothing you could ask about that he couldn't explain to you with all the details and the history. Yet I never saw him with a book in his hands. I never saw him reading anything. I think he must have had a private stash of books and magazines in his privately devoured. And then I'm thinking about Bach now. For a percussionist timpanist who only has a few notes to play in Handel's Messiah, and practically so for the Bach B minor Mass, He knew the scores completely. He knew the significance of each key and each movement of the Bach B minor Mass. It wasn't for Tim just to know the notes he had to play. He knew the scores intimately. He was a true musician. Listening. He soaked the tongue of the speaker dry. He looked you in the eye while speaking and whilst listening. He had listening eyes. Everything spoken would be remembered. Years later, off the cuff, he would speak of something that years later I had forgotten. He knew my history better than I. Family. A musician has many families. Each group, orchestra, ensemble with which he played over the years, each becomes a family. Most of all was his personal blood family. Tim was invested in his children and grandchildren in ways you cannot know, for you lived miles apart. You were always on his mind. He cared for you deeply and always spoke of his concerns about you and for you. Jackie. Without Jackie, Tim might not have had the last 15 years with us. Jackie has tirelessly been Tim's champion with the many doctors and hospitals through the years. As Jackie embraced Tim, he also embraced fully her family and relatives. Jackie's father, Shig, was also responsible for Tim surviving his first big bout of illness. I know that Shig's death when Tim was at Whippingham was a terrible personal loss to Tim. I think it broke his heart. This is an awesome loss for Jackie. It isn't easy to give up someone you love and who you consider family. Poetry. He loved poetry. I've included a poem, Timothy, which was the first poem Tim and I shared about children, and you will have it in a few papers I give to you. As for me, I have known Tim since 1976. That's last century. He knew my family, and he knew my girls. We have spent much time in sharing. Even when he was in his last place of rehabilitation in Santa Monica and could not speak because his vocal cords had been damaged in surgery, he asked about Crystal and how her job was going. When I visited Tim in the hospital, I read poetry to him. I can't stand it that he's gone. Tim was a significant person in my life. So I close with a poem. It's called The Bell. Beware the sound of the bell, for when it rings, you must follow. Follow the sound of the bell. Go inside and let the wind carry it down deep until you resonate with the eternal. The eternal, it is that which you cannot see. It is only for you to hear, not to share, not to touch. Yet you can feel it. You cannot see it, yet it brings tears to your eyes. You think you are at peace, yet why do you tremble? You have no fear, yet you are in the region of the unknown. Silent are you in this world of ones who dwell in the temple of madness. This vessel holding you tight and with the demands of conformity. Listen to the bell. Let it bring you to eternity.
I was Tim's student, starting from about 8 years old. Professional drum shop shirt, Lamar from their 25th anniversary in 1984. Because it always reminds me of Tim and just what a wonderful time it was to be young and preteen, and going to professional drum shop with Tim Boatman was one of the greatest things in the world you could do. It was just, he knew everybody, he knew the old Bob Yeager, the original owner, and you know, I go with him, we go behind the counter and check out, you know, try out, use cymbals, and he taught me how to roll drumsticks to figure out, find the ones that were straight, and as a young musician, just, he taught me so many details, and made me realize how important music is and our job is, because he invested so much time in me, getting my buzz roll right, and practicing timpani, you know, trying to get it perfect, and understanding how to tune while the orchestra's playing, change the tuning of the timpani, all these things were just like, he invested hours and hours and days and months into me, and yeah, I was taking drum lessons, but coming to this, I realized Tim has basically been there my whole life. And how many musicians in here tonight? So as we all know, you take this journey and it's a path. Here we are. We're still here. I know Paul Tracy, musician. I've known him 30 years or something. We do this thing, and Tim was so precise, and he was so patient. And so by the time I got into junior high, I had some chops. I could play bolero. It's really hard. It's hard to play soft. And I practiced a lot, you know. And I could play bolero. I could play the 3 camps at a hospital fire. And I could read. And I could play 5-stroke rolls, 9-stroke rolls, paradiddles, flams. So when I got to junior high, I had a confidence. I had something that made me feel confident, you know. So Tim was there when I was a kid. He was there when I was an adolescent. Teresa, it's good to see you. What has it been, 30 years? Funny thing is, here's an anecdote, because I saw Teresa, and I realized I remember meeting you probably at Idlewild. So Idlewild was a camp up in, or Isomata is a camp in Idlewild, where they had a summer arts camp. And so one year, I think Teresa was there. Were you? Where's Teresa? Anyway, so I'm at arts camp. I go up to arts camp. I've already been there as a student. Now I'm as a coach, because I've graduated from music school, and Tim says, hey, do you want to be a coach at Isomata? I'm going to be the percussion coach. You can be my assistant. So we go, and that was great, because I got to be Tim's assistant. You know, it was like one of my first professional deals. But Tim shows up at the arts camp with these big sunglasses and a robe, and he's adopted this character called Zoltan. And for the whole time, he was Zoltan. And if you go, Tim, can we get, he go, no, the Zoltan says he's Ellen Malitz. And so, I just remembered that when you were talking about it. He was funny. And I remember seeing the Mystic Nights of the Oingo Boingo when I was about 12 at the Aquarius Theater. And it was before Danny Elfman did the Boingo Boingo. This show was amazing, multimedia, costumes, characters, and Tim did the most amazing thing where it was part of the show where these guys, they all came out wearing diapers, and Tim told dirty jokes, really dirty jokes, in German. And nailed it. And there was 2 German people in the audience that were laughing hysterically. And I remember thinking, that's my drum teacher. He's versatile. But yeah, he was there. He was always there. And he was there. We mentioned that Red Van. it was such a joy for me in my youth and my disillusion about, society and mad at this and that. But Tim would call me and he'd go, hey, I'm going to pick your part. Just a dump, it's a junkyard. And to just even find a part for his van. And we did a lot, and I just loved it. It was like so great just getting that dirty, dingy van. There's timpani in the back and a crashed seat. And we would drive around LA, and I was just happier as pig as shit. I was like, this is the greatest thing in the world, driving around in traffic with Tim, hearing his stories. And one of the kindest, gentlest people as someone who learned from him. Like, I was able to relax with him, because he was so patient. And it wasn't like, it was just whatever time it took. And he took so much time. He'd say, your ring finger's not doing anything. I'm like, what do you mean? It's not moving. What do I do? Move it. Show me how. But his technique was so flawless and it was so beautiful. I never, ever wanted to do anything else but get better. Because he was so great. But he also, as you said, or someone was saying, like Teresa, he had an incredible groove. He taught me how to play shuffles, and he taught me how to listen to drummers. Like, he loved Al Jackson, played with Al Green, and he'd say, listen to how he's playing the bass drum behind the beat or the snare drum, he'd point out things that were really, really, subtle. But it taught me a lot, and I owe him everything in that sense, because he really taught me how to listen, and in symphonic music too, how to get out of burying your head in the music and like listen to the whole band and figure out how you fit into the whole picture, So as time went on, he was also like, he would call me and take me out of his boat. I don't know if you knew that he had a boat. He was determined to have his boat because his name was Boatman. He was like, they're coming on the boat. I have to have a boat. My name's Boatman. What are you talking about? So I just like 20 foot. How long was it? Yeah, it was a sailboat. And so one of my drum lessons would consist of, we go out on the boat, we drink some Bushnells, and eat camembert cheese and crackers. And this was very specific. This is the way it was. He did what he said. I was, I'm a student. So we get out there, we drink some we drink some Bushnells and eat some camembert, sail up to Malibu, put out the anchor, drink some more Bushnells, and eat some more camembert, go back. But it was a great time because he was really like more than a teacher. He was, a friend of our family. He stayed in our family. He rented a garage for all of his instruments for my grandmother and also an apartment. And they had an incredible relationship for years, and as my mother and I would always talk about, he knew more about our family history than we did. Because he would talk to my grandmother every morning and have copies. He'd be like, actually, that they moved to Ybor City in 1920 into a Cuban neighborhood, and that's why she speaks Spanish. And actually, she speaks Spanish better than she spoke Italian because she grew up in a Cuban neighborhood in Ybor City, town. You're like, wow, that really makes sense. That explains a lot. Anyway, it's great to be here. It's an honor. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. All those hands went up, all you musicians. See, it's the community. He's right. Yeah, Tim was like, the hang is important. The hang is so important because that's what we remember is hanging out together. I think of those gigs, it's really about us, and we all support each other. And he made me really understand how important our job is, and how precious our community is as people. No matter what music you do, I'll have that bond. So, Tim, thank you. Love you forever. And thank you for always just being there for me. Never judged. He'd give good advice like, she's not worth it, Joe. Or if one time I was mad at a club owner in Denver, and he was playing at the Joffrey or something down the street, and he came over, and I was upset about this guy, and he goes, "It's not worth it, Jim. Let it go." You know? Good advice. So thank you for letting me talk.
Tim's grandson would like to say a few words.
Hello, everybody. My name is Timothy Boatman. I'm Tim Boatman's grandson. It's a little different than everybody from up here. So many memories. My grandfather was amazing. He used to take me sailing all the time. He used to take me to training, museums, any kind of museum all over Los Angeles. I've probably been in every single museum in Los Angeles County. When he would come visit Ohio, he took me just about almost every museum in Ohio. And I always remember going to a musician store in Los Angeles. I don't remember the name of it, but I used to go there all the time, and so many familiar faces in here. I probably met a lot of you when I was a little kid. I remember going to LA Opera all the time, and I would always watch it from up top, and sometimes I would be down in your guys' lunchroom while you guys would be playing for hours, and I would just wait for Grandpa, and then when he would be done playing, everybody would be talking, and he would introduce me to so many people, and some people never got away from him. He would talk forever. But he knew everything. He really did. I remember one day I got a phone call. "Timothy, it's your grandfather." He was telling me how a cemetery in Cincinnati, Ohio, one of the first people buried in the cemetery in the 1800s, I think, was a boatman. Apparently. And he wanted me to know that. I have 2 children, and I have a son and a daughter. My daughter's named Viviana, and my son's name is Timothy as well. I named him Timothy after grandfather, and I have 2 M's also. And everybody's always like, "Why do you have 2 M's?" My grandpa has 2 M's, so I have to have 2 M's. Honestly, my best memory with Grandpa was he picked me up one time. We would always go sailing, and we went to the sailboat, and we got on there. And he sat down and said, "Tim, you're going to do everything today." I said, "What do you mean?" The whole time he was prepping me on how to sail a sailboat. I know how to sail a sailboat. Because we're boatmen, we have to know how to sail a sailboat. You know? And the craziest thing today was one of my friends in Ohio just posted a boat for sale, and I messaged him about it, you know. And I told him when I go back to Ohio, I'm gonna go look at it. Whether he might sell it before I get back, I don't know. But when we got there to the sailboat, it was baby blue, and I loved that boat. It had bars, and we would be in the sail, like sailing in the ocean. I would always go to the tip of the boat, and sometimes he didn't like it. Sometimes he just let me do what I wanted to do. Well, this particular day, he sat down and said, "Timothy, you're doing everything today." I had to start the engine. That was a workout for a little boy. And I started it up. I had to back us out with a barboard, and I had to take us all the way out to the ocean, put the sail up myself. We were out there for hours, and I sailed the sailboat the whole time, and then I took us back into the harbor myself and parked the boat, and tied it up. It's an amazing memory, and I still hold that forever. He got to meet both his grandchildren. He would come up to Ohio all the time. He loved my daughter, and my daughter loved him. And he didn't get to meet my son in person, but he did get to meet him over the phone on like FaceTime. He was amazing. He was the best. I always had a great time when I was with him. You know, I was thinking my grandfather, so there was times where I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to go. But I still went. And he was amazing. I'm thankful for all of you to come here today and to say your goodbyes. And, 3 weeks, I think it was about 3 weeks ago, or maybe, I don't know, my memory's been so foggy lately. We buried him, and I carried him to his hole, put him beside his brother. I put him in the ground, and I didn't let the workers cover him up. I did that myself. It was very sentimental to me, and I felt like I really needed to do it. And the whole way up, I was carrying him. I talked to him the whole time, told him goodbye. Told him I love selling to him, and he was an amazing grandfather. Everything about him was amazing. He was so smart. Just again, thank you all for coming. Scott, you're an amazing man. I really appreciate everything you've done for my grandfather. Jackie, you know, where are you? Jackie, your father was amazing. And you know, we would, you know how you guys had like a creek out back on the other side of the fence. He would always go up there with me and make sure I was okay. He always said there would be snakes or something. You guys had a lemon tree, and your mother would come out there and give me a bag, and I would take all the limes I could home so I could put them on my hot Cheetos. Your mom was amazing. Your father was awesome. I really liked your father. I loved your mom's frying ice cream, I think it was. She always made, every time I come to your house, she would make me ice cream. It was like green, I think it was. It was delicious. I loved going to your house and everything you done for my grandfather. Just again, thank you all for coming. Scott, I really appreciate everything you've done. Thank you all.
No, I worked with Tim sort of once every 2 years. My name is Paul Tracy, and I do Boatman shows in schools. And every couple of years I would write a new show for myself, and it had got new songs in it. And I get Tim to come in, and we go to the studio where was the studio? It's John Bird's mother's basement, the studio. And for example, he would really help me because I know what my talents are, but one of them is not keeping a steady beat. So my songs, when I sing songs with my guitar, I tend to go fast, slow, and I know that if I have an audience, especially if I want to sing along, I need a steady beat. And so I was lucky to find Tim Boatman, who had a steady beat. And he was able to help me with each song that I created by sort of making it complete. He was so much part of the creative thing when I was putting on a new show. So I really appreciated him. And what I appreciate tonight is all the previous speakers who said such nice things about Tim, because I knew all that stuff, but I was glad to know that I was right about it. It's very weird. Tim, well, he also very generous. When I was creating a new show, he gave me one of those traveling trunks. You know the sort that open up and become a closet? Yeah. One of those. I get an old one for some reason. This here with me. Any more stories, Susan? Reflect. Look, there's so many things for it to That's all. What are you going to talk about that? From your end. I think that's my new
this. We had a dance company, Free Black Dance Company. We performed at the Grand Library, did a lot of school shows and all of that. And Tim was very, very much involved, as he is with all of you in our little production that we did. We did all improvisation, and he improvised for us. And he brought all his instruments, set it up wherever we went. And if we had a problem, I know with me, he always would help. He'd always come up with solutions. Maybe if you tried this, and play that. And I'm an artist also. He'd come to my studio, and I'd have some happening project that I'm working on, and I couldn't make it fit together, because I like putting found objects. And he'd say, well, if you get this, wait a minute, I'll show you how to do it. And he'd take the time and the effort and find some wonderful solution for some anything I was doing. And always patient. He was very much a part of our family. Like I said, he would go to my son's teacher, and my mother and he had quite a relationship. She was Italian, and he would go over and she'd swear at him and call him names and feed him. And one time there was an earthquake or something, and they were afraid. He was afraid that Carmen was hurt, so he went and climbed into a bedroom window to make sure that she was okay. He was everything to everyone. I mean, he was an amazing, kind soul. I never saw him really get angry, and he'd always take everything into stride, just like everyone has said. Everyone has nailed it perfectly. Beautiful soul. We'll all miss him. I'll never forget him. I'll love him forever. And Jackie, thank you for taking such good care of me. I wanted to do so much, but I was really unable. And Timothy, I'm so proud. Tim was so proud of you. He loved his children so much. And meeting you tonight and seeing you, just what a treasure you are. And I'm so happy to see that you had all those wonderful experiences with your grandmother. What a good man Tim was. I'll tell you one cute story, and then that's it. I remember when Chris was 5 years old, and that's Tim's mother. And Tim got his tickets to the Nutcracker. So I took Chris and we went to see the Nutcracker at the Chandler. And the music starts, the lights dim, the music starts, and all of a sudden you hear the drum roll. And Chris jumps out of his seat, Tim! It was the cutest thing ever. Anyway, so I'll leave you with that darling thought and the wonderfulness of Tim.
Sally's coming up. Sally was the secretary of musicians transfer, where we all stored our instruments for years.
Musicians transfer for MTF. I'm not a musician, please. My mother was a concert pianist. I didn't have her. But anyway, on behalf of Musicians Transfer, I would like to share and give Jackie the family our deepest sympathy. Tim has been with us for many, many years. I started and Tim was always there. As I always said, like Teresa says, he's part of the family. He's a fixture. And for everybody that knew Tim with all of his equipment, there are times when I actually almost locked him in. He's there when I would get in, he's already there, and when I'm ready to leave, I hear this sound, I'm still here. Oh my God. I said, I just put the alarm on, I'm right back in. But because I'm not a musician, we did share certain things over the years. Family, the love of food. He says to me, do you know I had Filipino food? Do you know this family? I said, sure, Tim, there's only about 1 million. I know all of them in LA. He says, you must know them. Their name is so-and-so. And I said, well, let me check my book. I'm be on the list. They might be related to you, okay? But he would tell me that. But the one incident that really hit me the most, I'll share this with all of you because it was one time that I thought everybody was out of the office. And Scott is always there, Teresa's there. I know all the other guys back there. Bobby comes in late, Dale Anderson, God bless him, when he said goodbye to me. My son was deployed 3 times in the military. He was in Iraq, twice Afghanistan. So I was very composed, saying, I'm not going to show anybody what's going on until they're all gone. So about 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, Dale has already left. And he said, Sally, what's wrong? I said, oh. So all of a sudden, I said, I'm fine, but it's okay, you can go home. He said, is it because I made you stay late because I had to go pick up something? I said, no, it's okay. So once I locked that door, I burst. I didn't know Tim was still in the back because the guy said, everybody's gone. Tim comes walking, he scared the living daylights out of me. I thought I would have died. And he said, Sally, what's wrong? And I said, oh my God, Tim, I said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be, emotional. So when I told him what happened, I said, yesterday morning at 5 o'clock, I heard the report that there's a medic convoy that got hit. I know that was my son's unit. And it just broke me to pieces. And Tim came over and said, you know how you're always helping everybody out, all the musicians when they come in here, sometimes you don't even want to show your emotion. I said, I know, but he said, this is one time you can do it. He says, I'm a friend, I'm your family. And he says, you can do it, Sally. And I said, but I haven't heard from him. And I said, being deployed 3 times is not an easy task. Because I'm a military dependent. I grew in a military family. And Tim says, you know what, you've got a good heart. And I said, Tim, you got the biggest heart I know. And for you to stay here and sit with me until I'm comfortable so I could drive, thank you very much. And I'll never forget Tim for his kindness, his generosity, and the fact that I had throat surgery. You're right, he's a walking encyclopedia. He came over and said, you can't do this, do this, do this. Here, have a popsicle. And then one day I said, my back hurt. He said, he gives me his chiropractor. I said, I did go see your chiropractor. But he is a walking encyclopedia of many, many talents, international. He's the only one, as far as I know, right, Jackie, that went to Japan and went to meet your family there. He said that he invited a lot of the musicians. I said, oh, they don't know what they're missing. Japan is great. But in any case, we from musicians transfer to this kid. He is our family. He's a brother to us. He's one of the best musicians, and if I can tell you all the stories he told us, I can write a book. Good night.
I guess that's it then. And just in closing, before we all get a little more food or food. Oh, you want to say something? Oh. All right.
Good evening. We have homemade cookies, mochi, coffee, and on the other side of my job, I'm the artistic director of the Alhambra Performing Arts Center. And Jackie and Brendan's still here. Okay, he just performed for us. And we've been doing these concerts every month for 17 years at a local church in Alhambra. And it's called the Alhambra Performing Arts Center. Jackie's been a big help to us. And she's actually referred, where's the other musician? Right? Yeah, so he's going to be performing the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto in D major with piano. Because I said, I'm tired of going to the Hollywood Bowl to see Sarah Chang. I want somebody in my center. And we finally got some. Thanks, Jack. And we thank you for being patient with us. Hope food was okay. We're preparing some leftovers because we kind of have a lot. I think we have some take-home boxes, so if they're out there, please take them. But please help yourself to the mochi cookies and homemade chocolate chip cookies, coffee, and tea. And thank you. Vegan. Okay. And Jackie, do you want to say anything? Okay. Well, don't run away without taking some dessert. Thank you.
I just want to thank everybody for coming. It's great to hear stories about Tim. And if we're in a different location, I'll be happy to share all my stories. Thank you very much.